Joining me now, Fox News contributor and president of Independent Women's Voice, Tammy Bruce, along with the author of Firebrand, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz, start with you. Your reactions.
If the Biden-Harris administration is all about virtue signaling, they're forgetting the virtue part. These empty expressions of empathy at the border have done nothing but result in a humanitarian crisis. The bottom line is Trump's policies worked, and these people are repealing those policies. We heard from Biden that he was going to bring in this new professional class of diplomats. Well, I saw the Biden team get tossed around like rag dolls by China in Alaska when we were supposed to be standing up for our workers and our people. But they're not too good at that. Instead, they want to have circumstances where they profess that they're the adults in the room, yet they launch us back into the Syrian civil war. They bring us back into globalist organizations like the World Health Organization and sign us up for bad deals like the Paris Climate Accord. At the end of the day, it's all signaling, it's no virtue, and our people are worse off as a consequence.
And it feels to me, Matt, that this is a change from what there was a time when you could have a sort of reasonable conversation about, as Tam was saying, practical policies, what will work, who will do the better job. It feels like that's long gone. All they care about is asserting that they are morally superior and you are morally inferior.
And that is the entire purpose of this show, to reflect on positive populism as a driving realignment in American politics today. And I think that President Trump, putting our country and our people first, really led that realignment and accelerated it greatly. But just look at the situation in Central America as an example. The Biden-Harris administration, they don't want to extend physical security at the border. They don't want to give our Border Patrol more resources. Instead, what they want to do is they want to take $700 million and go try to make Central America great again, a Marshall Plan for these countries where the American taxpayer would again be hollowed out. Look what Trump did. Like you said, rising wages, better quality of life in urban America, but also you had real ambition in our country, the notion that your business could grow, capital investment could come back. If you made more money, it wouldn't just go to the government, it would go to your future. Yeah. I don't know who is really signing up for a future that is better for globalists, for international organizations, for the World Health Organization, for Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, and not for our people.
Welcome back. Breaking news this week from former CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield on the origins of the pandemic.
I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped. It's not unusual for respiratory pathogens that are being worked on in a laboratory to infect a laboratory worker.
This is huge. To repeat, the man who was in charge of the Centers for Disease Control at the start of the pandemic believes that it came from the Wuhan lab. Fauci, of course, fought back.
The alternative explanation, which most public health individuals go by, is that this virus was actually circulating in China, likely in Wuhan, for a month or more before they were clinically recognized at the end of December of 2019.
That is an astonishingly weak defense. As we have previously laid out, the pandemic virus was 10 to 20 times more infectious than its closest previously discovered relative. Fauci's suggestion they could have naturally gained that function in a month or so is laughable, but completely in line with his dishonest approach to almost every aspect of the pandemic. We know he commissioned the risky gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan lab. And 4 weeks ago, we showed you a statement from Rutgers University's Dr. Richard Ebright, who went on record with us that a 2019 project contracted by Fauci's NIAID, part of the National Institutes of Health, included gain-of-function research of concern. And this week, an interview with Dr. Ebright was published, which is even more of a bombshell than Robert Redfield's. Just listen to what he says about Dr. Fauci and his boss, Francis Collins, head of the NIH. According to Richard Ebright, Fauci and Collins have, quote, systematically thwarted efforts by the White House, the Congress, scientists and science policy specialists to regulate gain-of-function research of concern and even to require risk-benefit review for projects involving gain-of-function research of concern. So let's just be clear what that means. The people in charge of our response to infectious diseases have been the foremost global champions of risky virus research, that successive administrations have tried to stop or tightly regulate precisely because if it leaked from the lab, it could cause a deadly global pandemic. And now we hear, in the words of a world-renowned scientist who's been raising the alarm about all this for years, that Fauci and Collins have, quote, systematically thwarted efforts to regulate what they're doing. There is a ton of other invaluable information and insight in the eBright interview, including details of the flight range and hibernation patterns of horseshoe bats that cast further doubt on the natural origins theory, and I urge you to read the whole thing. But for now, I want to focus on this shocking and disturbing revelation about Doctors Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins going rogue and potentially causing this pandemic. When will we see a proper investigation and proper accountability? Let's discuss that now with one of the members of Congress who's been pushing for exactly that in the form of a letter to the HHS Principal Deputy asking for an investigation to NIH's relationship with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. He's back. It's Matt Gaetz. Matt, what do you make of this? The Fauci and Collins systematically thwarted attempts to regulate this risky research.
It was almost a year ago today that I exposed that U.S. taxpayer dollars were going to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And when I called for that funding to be revoked, President Trump called me that night and told me that it would happen. And so at least we can say today that American taxpayers are not funding this risky research. But remember, Steve, on this very program, you chronicled the 2018 cables from the State Department where we knew that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was not up to proper standards when it came to the laboratory researchers and their interactions with these respiratory diseases. So it is entirely possible that you have researchers getting too cozy with China, wanting to maintain those relationships, despite our government having the knowledge that there was a risk of this type of outbreak. Of course, the Wuhan coronavirus that sprung out of Wuhan, China, came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And Fauci's argument today, where I guess he continues the defamation of the pangolin, makes no sense, because even if there was community spread within Wuhan before we thought, that would not absolve the Wuhan Institute of Virology of the lack of safety standards and the high probability that that is precisely where this pandemic was launched onto the world.
Exactly right. And we know that we're going to get absolutely nothing of any use from the WHO investigation. We're supposed to have had it last week. It's been delayed. It's going to be a whitewash whenever it shows up based on what we've seen from them so far. So let's just talk about when the American people might get accountability for this. Because the question is, of course you're right, you know, the Chinese regime, it was their lab that allowed it to leak out. It looks very much like that was the case. And of course we know that they engaged in this very aggressive cover-up straight afterwards. That is well documented. But the question is, what were they working on in that lab and why, and that leaked? And that could trace back to our own government in the form of Fauci and Collins. Do you think that if the Republicans, if your party takes control of the House in the midterm elections, we might actually finally see a proper investigation into Fauci's role?
Well, we simply cannot wait for that. We have to determine whether or not any researcher, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Collins, or otherwise in the United States, was aware of the lax safety that was going on there and might have been aware of any type of improper utilization of this very sensitive research. We can't wait. We need to immediately utilize the Freedom of Information Act process that is available to any American. So this initial letter that we sent to get answers from the administration is only a first step, but we're going to do follow-up in this Congress. We're not going to promise the people that if they vote for us, we'll take action. We have to take action right now, because there could be extensive concern and threat that our country would face going forward if there are these types of arrangements elsewhere.
Fantastic. So are you going to do Freedom of Information requests? Have you already done that? What's the process there?
Yep. Yeah, no, that's absolutely what we're going to do. We're going to get the information with any of the tools that we have available to us. Certainly, it's our hope that we'll get that as a consequence of the letter that we've sent. But Democrats should be joining us with this, Steve.
Yeah,
Democrats should be on board to get the information, to get it out to the people. Because, I mean, the American people know that something's rotten at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They know that the World Health Organization and that China are whitewashing the review. And so it's going to be incumbent upon us to get those answers.
Well, they're not going to do anything. They're all in love with Fauci. So, I mean, good luck getting anything sensible out of them. But anyway, Matt Gaetz, I'm glad you're fighting for this. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Congressman Matt Gaetz. If you liked that video, make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and join us on our daily podcast, Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz, on your favorite podcast listening platform.